Thank you for joining us on Newsmakers. I'm Fred Martino. In addition to incumbent Democrat Jennifer Granholm and Republican Dick DeVos, there is a Libertarian candidate for governor, and we welcome him to our program for the next half hour. I'm pleased to have with us in the studio Greg Creswell. Greg, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm flattered.
Good to meet you.
Thank you much. Thank you much.
For our viewers, many of whom probably aren't familiar with your candidacy, I want to give you a chance to start off with to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in politics and, of course, your decision to run for governor.
Sure. I was a college student back in the early 80s and listening to talk radio back in the Detroit area. I first heard about the Libertarian Party on a talk show, and I went to the library, local library, and looked up the party information and read about Ayn Rand and other folks like that, and decided that this party was meant for me because they believe in individual rights in the free market. And while the two major parties were, in my opinion, statists, so to speak, where they want to tell us how to run our lives, and I was opposed to that. And so as I learned more and more about the party, I finally voted for the candidacy of Ron Paul, who is now in the U.S. House. Down from Texas, and voted for him as president. And ever since then, I've been voting for a person for the party. I also joined the John Kuhn for U.S. Senate campaign, and it was a fantastic experience, and I enjoyed it. And from there, I got a chance to travel throughout the state, and as you can see, some of our lit is in Hunter's Orange, and they really showed up in the autumn days of September and October, so we could spot it a mile away. But anyway, it was something that I wanted to do. I'm 49 years old now. I'm married. I've been married for over 20 years with 2 offsprings, and I'm hoping that I can pass the information along to our children, that the best way to live in this United States is to live and support a free society where the politicians do not dictate to us how we should live our lives.
When you say that, specifically, what are some of the areas in which you believe, and let's start with the state government, because of course you're running for governor.
Sure.
The state government is intruding into our lives in a way that you think is objectionable.
Sure. Seatbelt laws, for one. I mean, believe me, I do advocate that an individual use a seatbelt when driving, but I don't believe a politician should be able to force us to wear a seatbelt. Helmet laws. Again, I'm a firm believer in having a helmet when you ride a bicycle. My wife and I had our kids wear helmets when they were riding their bikes, and they didn't like it, but they wore it anyway. But it should be up to the parents or parent, not the politician. And smoking is another thing too. They want to tell a private business owner that they should section off an area where to smoke. Where we believe in a free society, the business owner would run their business, and if they see fit to have a smoking section, then they would. If not, then the person who cannot stand smoke would go someplace else to where there isn't any smoking. So those are one of the 3 issues, and there's many, many more.
Well, let's talk about seatbelts and helmet law. Some would say that with the fact that the state supports health programs, and in some of the cases where if an accident occurs, the state, and therefore you and I, because we pay taxes,
yes,
we have to pay for medical expenses that might not have had to be incurred had that person been wearing a seatbelt or wearing a helmet in the case of someone on a motorcycle.
Yes,
what are your thoughts? I mean, what do you say to that?
That is the problem right there, where the state, the politicians are making you pay for my mistakes, and that should not be the case.
Okay.
The way it should be is
state support of health care is not a good thing.
It is not correct. That's the problem.
Okay. What do we do for those who fall through the cracks, though?
Donations.
Okay.
We as a country, we donate billions and billions of dollars to different causes throughout the world. The tsunami a couple of years ago, down south in the Gulf area, we donated over $500 million. So we are a generous people here in this country. So donations would not be a problem when it comes to financial aid for somebody.
Okay.
Yes.
As you know, Greg, the top issue in the gubernatorial campaign between Governor Granholm and Dick DeVos, the things they talk about the most, deal with the economy and job creation.
Yes.
I want to get your platform on these issues because certainly this is really the focus of the campaign.
It sure is. Job creation, that's actually more when it comes to politicians creating jobs. Politicians only steal jobs from one industry and get it to another. The best way to do is to support and pass tax relief across the board for everyone, for a company where they can hire more employees, for citizens where they can be able to buy more of those items from that particular company or store, and you will see a much prosperous state from top to bottom. And so when you hear politicians say that we will provide you with jobs, that is so threatening and so scary. Politicians, don't trust me to bring you a job or provide you for a job. You should be of the mindset that you would seek out employment on your own.
Okay. So you're saying tax relief is what will create jobs in the state of Michigan.
Sure.
If that's the case, what kind of tax relief as governor would you advocate in the state of Michigan?
A repeal of all the taxes gradually, along with the fees, license, and permits. For instance, the company that I work for a hospital down at DMC, Detroit Medical Center. Now, this hospital has to get permission from the politician to open up another hospital, or to increase their bed allotment. Now, that is so ridiculous for a business person to ask permission from a politician to increase the size of their business. Also, to regulations, that's a part of it too, where we spend, because of regulations, it's upwards of the $200 million to comply with politicians telling us how to run our business, and that's wrong.
You mentioned one specific regulation there, the certificate of need that a hospital would have to have. Getting back to the original question about taxes, are there specific taxes that you would target first? Because you mentioned reducing all taxes and eventually eliminating them, but are there specific ones that you want to target first?
Yes, the first one, of course, is the small business tax. That's the first one. The second
Which they voted to get rid of. You mean the single business tax?
Single business tax,
right,
yes.
But we don't know what yet they're going to replace it with.
Well,
you say maybe nothing is what you would do.
Well, we are in support of the politician not having any access to taxes whatsoever, because all they're going to do is waste it on things that should not be spent on, paid for. Also, too, the state income tax, that's another thing too, where it was voted on back in the 60s from the way I understand it, and the citizens voted for it. And again, when the politicians got more of our money, what did they do? They went from a part-time lawmaking body to a full-time, and they also increased their pay. Every time politicians receive more and more money, they spend and spend more. And that's why we also support the stop overspending proposal that is on the ballot. We support that to where we would cut spending and leave it up to the private sector for a whole host of things throughout the state.
Okay. You mentioned the legislature, and of course there are some folks who would propose cuts to the legislature. What would you like to do as far as that goes? One body, a unicameral, or just part-time?
Both.
Yes,
okay. Unicameral and part-time, and they would also lead to cutting their pay, their benefits, and their perks. That would make them a citizen's politician, to where they wouldn't have any mechanism to intrude into our lives more than what they do now. Believe me, part-time lawmakers, it makes a much freer society here in Michigan.
Well, and of course a lot of states do have part-time
Sure
state
do.
legislators.
Fred, are you aware, Fred, that most of those states that have part-time lawmakers, their taxes are lower than Michigan's? The states that have full-time lawmakers, like California, New York, Michigan, our taxes are the highest. So we need part-time lawmakers.
Okay. As you know, one of the most controversial areas where taxation is involved in the state of Michigan has been education.
Yes.
Proposal A, many years ago,
Yes.
voted in to give some tax relief to folks.
Yeah. Sure did. Sure.
On the ballot in November, though, there's an initiative that's supported by some educators who say we need more money. Proposal A isn't working, and this is going to give us inflationary increases.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on education funding?
No. That proposal should be defeated, first of all.
Okay.
And the second, for the unions to want more of our money, which keeps us from tending to our needs as taxpayers. It shows that that's a threat to our livelihood in a free society. What we ought to do is gradually support the private sector when it comes to private schooling, where we can retain our finances and we could educate our children to the best of our ability through homeschooling, parochial school, private school, whatever the case may be, however the parents decide, but it should not go to where the unions dictate that we are taxed more and more, and at the inflation rate it goes up and up and no, that's more money to the politicians' hands. Power and control is what the politicians want by the two major parties, and that's a threat to us every day. We libertarians do not want to have power and control over your lives. We feel that you can live your life as you best see fit.
Okay. Sticking with education for a moment, of course, another major expense for the state is our university system. Your thoughts on state funding for universities?
Same thing. What you have is the states asking for more money because they're asking to pay higher salaries for the professors. Again, get the state colleges into the private sector hands, and you will see a much run system throughout the state.
Greg, what do you say to folks who say with that example, wait a minute, we just saw 1,000 new jobs come to the state of Michigan from Google.
Yes.
And they located in Ann Arbor, and
Yeah.
one of the reasons they said, was because there's a strong University of Michigan system.
Yes.
And of course, one of the reasons it's strong is state funding. What do you think about that?
Donation would be much better, and let a company like Google open up their own school that would, like Hillsdale, and run it and provide the tools to teach a person certain fields that is needed for 2006 and beyond. But to put it under the control of politicians, again, it defeats the purpose of a free society.
Okay. One of the biggest national issues when it comes to a free society has come into focus in the last couple of years, and that is the idea of eminent domain. A great deal of concern about this. Of course, the Supreme Court ruling on this as well. You have a lot of concern about eminent domain. I want to give you a chance to talk about that.
Thank you. Again, where the politicians feel it is in their best interest to take private citizens' private property, and give it to another private citizen, as opposed to maybe using it for roads or for schools or maybe a water sewage plant. And see, this is where you get the corruption, where if I'm able to contribute to your campaign, Fred, of course I'm going to want something in return. So I want to build a mall across the street, and I want you to also claim that you're going to take my neighbor's property and make me richer. Eminent domain is, again, it is on the ballot this year, and we support it at a much stronger manner than what it is now. And it is so dangerous how politicians can just take a person's property, claiming that this area is blighted. Yeah, right. I'm sure it gives them the reason to steal people's private property, and that's wrong.
Okay. In your answer, you mentioned the idea of folks making campaign contributions and wanting something in return for that.
Yes.
I want to ask you about campaign finance,
sure,
because this is going to be the most expensive governor's race in history in the state of Michigan. Millions and millions of dollars spent on advertising.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about this, and should there be some kind of a change?
No, well, there's some, and that is to be immediate disclosure, and that's it. If an individual wants to donate to our campaign $5 million, please do it, $5 million. That's all it should be. No, there should not be any limits on how much this should be contributed to anybody's campaign, whether it be state rep or mayor or governor. So we are opposed to any type of limitations when it comes to contributions.
Okay. With that in mind, what are your thoughts about the Libertarian Party and about your own candidacy and getting the word out? Because in fact, we're probably one of the few media organizations doing interviews with candidates who are not necessarily a Republican or a Democrat.
And first, again, to say this from the outset, that we are grateful that you have allowed us this chance to voice our opinions and comments. Over the years, the two major parties have passed laws, ballot access laws, that have prevented the small parties from getting on the ballot. And because of the top of the ticket issue, where if you don't get so many votes by the top of the ticket, whether it be the president for our party or the governor, then we have to go back out and gather signatures. Well, we believe after a few years we was able to successfully strike that down, but still though it's a struggle to get the message out, and but thank God for some supporters. We are receiving donations. We are getting the word out, and the internet. Thank God for that. We are more connected with people throughout the state and throughout the country than ever before. So thanks for the internet.
Okay.
Yes.
How are you using the internet in your campaign? Because I would imagine that's an extremely important venue for you.
Yes, it is. We're receiving a lot of emails from a lot of supporters, first-time supporters, those who did not even know that we even existed, and so that's been of some great help. We're also in the future we'll be able to they'll be able to contribute through the internet to our party as they can now, but in future campaigns. For state office or even for local office. So that's of great help, believe me.
Okay. You know, a common theme, and we also spoke to the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate on this program, a common theme is the idea of loosening government restrictions on a variety of different programs. And one that's been in the spotlight in the state of Michigan, but also has been in the spotlight nationally, is stem cell research. Of course, Governor Granholm mentioned in her State of the State address her opinion that state restrictions on stem cell research should be loosened. On the national level, the Senate and House voting on the issue, but President Bush vetoing federal funding, expanded federal funding of stem cell research. What are your thoughts on this?
George Bush did the right thing. It should not be done with taxpayers' money. It should be done through the private sector. If you
you're saying you do support the ability for stem cell research, but you just don't want it funded through the government.
Correct.
Okay.
Free, open market. And there are such programs out there, not through the private sector. So it's just a red herring by the Democrats who want to again use a welfare state to further their cause, and that's the problem with Jennifer Granholm.
Okay. You know, Governor Granholm and her Republican opponent, Dick DeVos, have both said that they are against a ballot initiative this fall, the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative. Want to get your opinion on that.
Well, that just shows you that the two major parties in the state support state-sponsored racism or discrimination, and that is wrong. We are opposed to that. We believe that everyone is equal. All right, and that person, everyone should be judged based on their test scores, SATs, ACTs, but not their gender and not their race. And thanks to Mr. Ward Connolly, he's come to Michigan because he sees that an injustice was served by the U.S. Supreme Court. And so we've got it on the ballot. And I was out there myself as a volunteer in the cold snow, wintry days of January, and I got many of signatures from in the area that I live in, Detroit, from Black Americans, White Americans, Arabic Americans, Asian Americans, and Hispanic Americans. The wording was on the ballot that they signed. There was for them to claim that there's a fraud has been committed. It's just something to try and scare the voters who believe that this issue should be passed. It should be a vote yes on MCRI Proposal 2. And it's in 2006. I cannot believe that they are endorsing state-sponsored discrimination. When it was signed in 1960, October affirmative action by JFK, President Kennedy, it stated that the government should not discriminate based on your skin color. Here, today in 2006, they want the government to discriminate against white Americans and Asian Americans. In California, there was a cap on Asian Americans getting into higher education, so that Black Americans and Hispanic Americans who weren't scoring as high can get into the colleges. State-sponsored discrimination is wrong. Jim Crow was wrong, and so is racial and gender preference.
Okay. In terms of this issue, Greg, when we talk about the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative, let's talk specifically about your reaction that you've gotten on this issue on a personal nature, being an African American.
Sure. Well, it's the typical name calling, and Mr. Connolly has received it the same, and so have others. It's not surprising, and so it's just water off. It's like water off a duck. I just keep on fighting for what I believe to be the proper mindset. As a libertarian, I believe that we all are equal under the law. Plain and simple. I don't want the government to do anything for me, to discriminate for me or against me. As simple as that.
Okay. As we quickly run out of time here, any other major issues, Greg, that you want to touch on that are important to you to let folks know as you want their vote for governor?
I'm hoping to convince the voters that if you want to live in a freer society in Michigan to where you can keep all of your money, vote Libertarian. If you believe in private property rights, vote Libertarian. If you believe in the free market and individual rights, vote for Libertarians. Greg Creswell, GregCreswell.org. Our website is there. If you have any questions, we'll answer your questions. But we're hoping to convince a lot of voters that the two major parties believe in some form of government incursion, and we are opposed to that.
Okay. Well, we only have about a minute left, and certainly we've covered a lot of different areas in your campaign. In that final minute, Greg, as you think about this race, what to you is the most important thing for voters to remember in November?
That if they are looking for a change, if they're tired of what's going on in Lansing with the two major parties, to give us the once over, look at us, and ask yourself, Are you freer today than you were 200 years ago as a citizen? Are you freer today than you were 100 years ago? If not, it's because of the laws passed by the two major parties that believe that what you own belongs to them.
Okay. Greg, thank you so much for being with us.
Fred, thank you very much.
Good to meet you.
I'm flattered. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you at home as well. We hope you'll join us on the radio too every weekday starting at 5 with Morning Edition, midday at noon, All Things Considered from 4 until 6:30, and the best news talk programming the rest of the day. Talk to us too. We'd love to hear from you. The address feedback@gvsu.edu or drop me a line in the mail, 301 West Fulton, Grand Rapids, 49504. And we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.